For decades, China has been and still remains North Korea's most important ally, biggest trading partner, and main source of food, arms, and energy. But with strains in the relationship beginning to surface amid continued provocations by Pyongyang, where is the alliance headed? As North Korea continues to demand international recognition as a legitimate nuclear state, we discuss whether that is ever a possibility, as well as an outlook on the changing dynamics in Northeast Asia, today on Peninsula 24. Now, North Korea obviously makes headlines almost every day for its nuclear programs, and I think we're in fact at the one of those higher peaks of North Korea's nuclear tensions, especially in the Northeast Asian region these days. What is your assessment of the current North Korean regime's foreign policy?
North Korea wants to reach the goal of a nuclear state within a very short span period of time. That's why now the Kim Jong-un regime is accelerating its process of completing the nuclear, the program, as well as the ICBM, and Kim Jong-un regime wants to show to America that North Korea is capable to strike American territory with ICBM tipped with nuclear weapons. So North Korea so far has never stopped the development of its nuclear weapons, even during the period of Kim Il-sung and Kim Jong-il. But the Kim Jong-un is a little bit more, open and provocative in his way to nuclear weapons state, and he believes that he can complete this process within a period of 1 year when there is a political turmoil or transition in South Korea because of presidential election and also the change of U.S. administration. So it is a right time, Kim Jong-un believes, that to complete this process. That's why Kim Jong-un regime, looked a little bit in a hurry in that process.
What is it that North Korea wants? Is it dialogue with the U.S. or is it hostile standoff with the U.S.? Because it's a little confusing because they seem to be using these different cards to bring the U.S. to a negotiations table. So dialogue amongst the two, of course, not with others. Is it that or is it hostile standoff?
As I said, the goal of Kim Jong-un regime is to get the nuclear status from America. But so far, the Americans' policy towards North Korea was denuclearization. The format of Americans' policy was denuclearization first and then the dialogue next. Mm-hmm. So basically, the world community and America have not yet, they accepted North Korea as a nuclear state, and so far a lot of resolutions and the decisions were made to sanction North Korea. But Kim Jong-un wants to get rid of these sanctions, and he wants to justify his past history of provocations. That is the current goal by Kim Jong-un.
North Korea, obviously, to my understanding so far, is not going to be earning a nuclear state status.
Some people do not think like that because, there is already the precedent in world history of nuclear arms race. For instance, India and Pakistan, have got the status of nuclear state, even though the world NPT system does not recognize these two countries as a nuclear state. But what happened, that India and Pakistan conducted the several nuclear tests in a very short span of time, and they made a kind of, the promise to the world community of the further ban of their nuclear test in return for removal of the sanctions. And what they really achieved is that these days, India and Pakistan are not in the list of sanctions by the world community. So to some extent, India and Pakistan achieved their goal. And Kim Jong-un regime wants to follow the suit. And what they think can achieve in a way like they can promise a kind of temporary ban on nuclear, the test or an ICBM test in return for easing the sanctions against North Korea and the halt of South Korean-US joint military drill. And some people actually these days are more or less, supporting this kind of, the way of solving North Korean issues. I know the Chinese foreign minister, the Wang Yi proposed a kind of, the deal, freeze for freeze and suspension for suspension. In other words, Chinese proposed the halt of U.S. military exercise and the deployment of THAAD in South Korea in return for the ban on North Korea's nuclear test and ICBM test. In a word, that kind of proposal is based on a kind of compromise on the current North Korean nuclear threats.
But China, however, is against North Korea's nuclear programs, however.
Yes.
China seemingly is unhappy with many things that North Korea conducts these days. For instance, North Korea, tests nuclear bombs or launches its missiles without notifying China first and the likes. And it seems like we've seen a lot more friction, if you will, between North Korea and China in recent days compared to previous years. Would you agree with that?
Chinese has a little bit, the very difficult, the feelings. For instance, one hand, they should oppose the North Korea's nuclear program because, if this kind of, the present the status with North Korea with nuclear weapons, goes on, then Chinese is afraid of the next stage where South Korea or Japan may think of developing nuclear weapons by themselves, And what you see concerns most for Chinese is that if South Korea and Japan is on its way of arming itself with nuclear weapons, then it could influence the Taiwanese, for possible nuclear arming. So that is the scenario which Chinese would, not, allow in any case. But on the meanwhile, now Chinese are contemplating that what could be the best way to maintain North Korean system if the nuclear weapon is the only guarantee to maintain the stability of Kim Jong-un regime, then China has to accept that reality and let North Korea have that kind of nuclear, the weapon. So what most important for Chinese is the stability of Kim Jong-un regime. And if nuclear weapon is the only way to stabilize the current Kim Jong-un regime, then Chinese is ready to accept that scenario.
So is it the fact that North Korea is fully aware of such concerns by China and perhaps using it to its leverage?
Of course, North Koreans are very well aware of these, the Chinese dilemma, and also North Koreans are very well aware that in any case, China cannot, abandon the strategic assets of North Korea.
Now, it makes me wonder, who makes these calls in North Korea? Is it Kim Jong-un and Kim Jong-un alone? Because Kim Jong-un then would mean that he is the best of the best, the brightest in every single sector in the world global arena. So he makes foreign policy decisions, he makes economic decisions, he makes, cultural decisions, he makes ideological decisions, everything. So I wonder, who makes the call? Who makes the decisions on these foreign policy initiatives?
Of course, there are certain group of people, who advise and supports Kim Jong-un leadership.
Who are these advisors?
Of course, it is a kind of, the hidden organization in North Korean society. The ordinary North Korean people even didn't know the existence of this organization, because according to the structure of North Korean, the power system, it was never, the broadcasted or, never open to the media. But in North Korean terms, we call it a third floor, or either we call it a secretariat of the Central Committee of Workers' Party of Korea.
So why are they hidden?
These are the people who actually give all recommendations, advice or recommendations, and Kim Jong-un. But, if Kim Jong-un is seen by the people that, he is advised, or he is just controlled by this certain group of people, then he cannot be regarded as a kind of, divine being. They are totally disconnected from the society.
Now, how likely is a possibility of a summit meeting between Chinese President Xi Jinping and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un?
At this moment, it is really unlikely, because as far as Xi Jinping is concerned, Xi Jinping regime prefers the continuation of the development of Chinese economy, but Xi Jinping's outside, the environment so far is not very favorable for the continuation of Chinese economy. Xi Jinping, cannot abandon the North Korean factor as well, because you see, North Korea is a kind of bumper zone to him. But he can't, accept Kim Jong-un's visit to China, while Kim Jong-un still advocating the policy of openly developing its the nuclear, the program, because Xi Jinping wants to present the world that the North Korean nuclear issue is under his control, So that's why if the summit between Kim Jong-un and Xi Jinping is likely to happen, then there should be a kind of, the compromise between Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un in advance, Kim Jong-un should give a kind of guarantee that North Korea would halt, the current continuation of nuclear program in return for economic aid and the removing of, some economic sanctions by China or whatever. But is Kim Jong-un ready to deliver that kind of, the compromise to Xi Jinping? No. Kim Jong-un wants to finish, his own ambition in a very short span of time. So that's why, as long as Kim Jong-un is on that, the track, then Xi Jinping cannot, invite Kim Jong-un to China.
How desperate is Kim Jong-un for a summit with Chinese president?
Oh, Kim Jong-un is very desperate, because, it is very important for Kim Jong-un, to legitimize his leadership to North Korea. But so far as a North Korean leader, he hasn't visited any foreign country, China or Russia. So Kim Jong-un is very desperate. But the nuclear, the possession is more important than, the visit to China to Kim Jong-un.
Let's talk about what's going on in Malaysia. So it
Yes.
looks like North Korea-Malaysia diplomatic relations have come to a great obstacle. Do you think that diplomatic relations could continue there?
North Korean Kim Jong-un regime is very desperate to get, the dead body of Kim Jong-nam, back to North Korea. And North Korean regime even doesn't mind the cancellation of, diplomatic relations with Malaysia. Usually, those, the behavior by North Korea so far is beyond the normal, the imagination. They are, detaining the diplomats and the family members of diplomats as a kind of hostage in North Korea. That is really beyond the normal practice. Even the countries, when they are at war, they usually expel the diplomats and the family members. You see, no country in human history so far detained diplomats as kind of hostage. Every country respected a kind of privilege and immunity of diplomats. But North Korea, they want to show to Malaysia that they would do anything if Malaysian government does not return the body of Kim Jong-nam. Then why the dead body of Kim Jong-nam is so important, Kim Jong-un, is that, now the world is accusing Kim Jong-un of this assassination. And I think Kim Jong-un cannot escape that kind of denunciation. But what Kim Jong-un most worries is the impact, of the spread of the news of this assassination to its own North Korean people. So if in the future North Korean people would hear the news of this assassination of his half-brother, then I think the people will be furious, The family members of Kim Jong-nam now are staying in China.
Right.
So according to the normal, the norm, then the body of Kim Jong-nam should be sent to China, where the family members are. But if Chinese refuse to accept, then Malaysian authority, can't do anything. So the only alternative for Malaysia, to send that body back, to North Korea, where Kim Jong-nam was born. So the Chinese factor, would play the main decisive role for the final settlement of this case.
So obviously, North Korea is unmindful of its diplomatic relations with any country at this point, and it continues to find itself isolated more and more from the global arena. What is running through the mind of Kim Jong-un?
Oh, Kim Jong-un, wants to play a kind of, the madman's the tactics, so that, he wants to dictate his own the willingness and thoughts on the world community, no matter which country, you know. Up to now, you know, some countries, to some extent, you know, the accepted, you know, this kind of, you know, the math tactics. What happened to the American hostages, you know, in North Korea? You know, North Korea, with their hostages, you know, North Korea said that these hostages could only be released if, for instance, Bill Clinton, you know, came to North Korea for the release of, so that, you know, so far this kind of hostage policy worked to some extent. And I'm not quite sure whether this time this kind of hostage policy would work again or not, but the development so far seems working.
What are your prospects for the Northeast Asian region regarding North Korea, when we put the North Korea equation into the Northeast Asian policy?
These days, there are a lot of debate what we should do, and you see what could be the best way to solve the current crisis. And many people proposed a lot of, you know, the new initiatives and ideas how to deal it, but most of those, you know, the ideas and initiatives are, to my interpretation, based on the possibility of removing the North Korean nuclear weapons by persuading, you know, Kim Jong-un regime. But to me, actually, you know, that this is not the matter of the quality or contents of the incentives to Kim Jong-un regime. The only way to solve the current and the future crisis, you know, on North Korea is the elimination of Kim Jong-un regime. And in order to reach that goal, I think the first most important thing we should do is that we should show our full determination towards North Korea and China that South Korea and America are ready and are fully determined to do anything to remove Kim Jong-un regime. And secondly, I think we should try to avail all possible means to remove, you know, Kim Jong-un regime from the ruling by first, you know, disseminating informations, educating North Korean people, you know, for resistance, you know, and, you know, uprising. That is the only way to solve the problem.
So what you're saying is, as a diplomat, there is no diplomatic way to resolve this issue of North Korea vis-a-vis the rest of the world.
No, Kim Jong-un will never, you know, abandon and give up its nuclear program. We should convince Chinese authority that the reunified of Korea and removal of Kim Jong-un regime will bring a lot of benefit to China as well. That is most important thing at this moment.
So China holds key.
Yes.
I think North Korea will, in the shorter term, in the next few months at least, will be a very difficult puzzle for the rest of the world to put together and come up with a solution.
I think so, yeah.
Well, thank you so much for today's talk.
Thank you.